The emergency council chamber buzzed with panic as representatives from across the galaxy gathered in desperate haste. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire slammed his four-armed fist against the crystalline table, sending ripples of blue energy across its surface. "This is madness!" he roared, his scaled face twisted in fury. "You cannot seriously suggest we ask them for help." High Counselor Naya of the Ethereal Collective floated serenely above her designated spot, her translucent form shimmering with barely contained anxiety. "The Devourers have consumed 17 star systems in the past month alone. Our combined fleets have been reduced to scattered remnants. What other choice do we have?" The chamber fell silent except for the nervous clicking of mandibles from the Insectoid Federation's delegate and the low, rumbling growls from the Canine Brotherhood's representative. At the far end of the table sat Admiral Corex of the Galactic Defense Force, his weathered face bearing the weight of countless defeats. "The projections are clear," Corex said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "At their current rate of expansion, the Devourers will reach the core worlds within 6 months. Our technology cannot match their bioships. Our weapons barely scratch their hull matrices. We need something different." Zethkar's eyes blazed with ancient hatred. "You speak of the Deathworlders as if they were our salvation. Have you forgotten what they did during the Contact Wars? How they turned our own weapons against us? How they made mockery of tactics that had worked for millennia, because they don't fight like civilized beings," hissed Sektar from the Reptilian Dominion. "They have no honor, no structure, no respect for proper warfare. They are chaotic, unpredictable, and dangerous. Dangerous enough to give the gods pause," whispered Naya, her form flickering with remembered fear. "During the Convergence, when the Elder Ones themselves descended from their cosmic thrones to punish mortals for their hubris, only one species made them retreat." The chamber erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. The Convergence was ancient history, a time when beings of unimaginable power had decided the galaxy's younger races had grown too bold, too advanced. They had come to reset civilization, to reduce all sentient life to primitive states suitable for eternal servitude. Every species had tried to negotiate, to plead, to offer tribute. The gods had laughed and continued their work of systematically dismantling every achievement of the past million years, until they reached Sol 3. "The humans fought them," Admiral Corex continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Not with superior technology or ancient wisdom, but with something the gods had never encountered before. They fought with the fury of a cornered animal, the cunning of a predator, and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat that only comes from a species that crawled out of a world trying to kill them every single day." Counselor Vex of the Aquatic Confederation rippled his tentacles nervously. "The reports from that time are unsettling. Humans using debris as weapons, turning their own ships into kinetic projectiles, fighting hand-to-hand with beings that could reshape matter with a thought. They bit one," Naya added quietly. "According to the archives, a human soldier actually bit a god. The shock of experiencing physical pain for the first time in eons apparently sent ripples through the cosmic order. And when the gods tried to break their will with fear," Corex said, "the humans did something unprecedented. They got angry. Not afraid. Angry. The gods expected worship, terror, or submission. They got rage and defiance." Zethkar snorted in disgust. "Madness. Pure madness. And you want to unleash that madness on the Devourers? The Devourers are not gods," Sektar pointed out reluctantly. "They are a plague, consuming everything in their path. They show no mercy, make no deals, accept no surrender. Perhaps madness is what we need." Admiral Corex activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked Devourer-controlled space, expanding like a cancerous growth toward the core worlds. "Look at this and tell me we have any other choice. Every conventional strategy has failed. Every alliance has crumbled. Every technological advantage has been overcome. The humans have been isolated in their corner of the galaxy for 300 years, added Dr. Melvin from the Scientific Consortium. Our intelligence suggests they've been busy. Their rate of technological advancement is unlike anything we've documented. They don't just improve existing designs. They completely reinvent fundamental principles, because they don't know what's impossible. Vex muttered. They never learned proper limitations. The weight of desperation hung heavy in the chamber. Each representative knew their species faced extinction if the Devourer advance continued. The bioships seemed to adapt to every tactic, every weapon, every defensive strategy. They consumed not just matter, but energy, information, even the quantum foundations of space-time itself. If we do this, Zethkar said slowly, if we actually contact the humans and ask for their help, what makes you think they'll agree? They have no love for any of us. Naya's form brightened slightly. Because they are humans. According to every psychological profile we have, they possess an almost compulsive need to protect what they consider theirs. And despite our past conflicts, we share this galaxy. We are, in their terms, neighbors. Neighbors they went to war with, Sektar reminded them, but also neighbors they chose not to completely destroy when they had the chance, Corex countered. After the Terran uprising, when their fleet could have pressed their advantage and conquered half the galaxy, they stopped. They demanded only to be left alone. The chamber fell silent again as each delegate wrestled with the implications. Asking humanity for help meant admitting that the self-proclaimed guardians of galactic civilization were helpless. It meant acknowledging that the species they had dismissed as barbaric savages might be their only hope for survival. There are practical concerns, Dr. Melvin said carefully. Human military doctrine is based on total war principles. They don't conduct limited engagements or surgical strikes. When they fight to completely eliminate the threat. Good, growled Corex. That's exactly what we need. But it also means they might not stop with just the Devourers, Melvin continued. Once unleashed, human military forces tend to continue until they believe the threat is permanently neutralized. Are you suggesting they might turn on us afterward? Vex asked, tentacles coiling with anxiety. I'm suggesting that humans don't think in terms of temporary solutions. They think in terms of final ones. Zethkar leaned back in his chair, all four arms crossed. So, our choice is to die slowly at the hands of the Devourers, or possibly die quickly at the hands of our rescuers. Not necessarily, Naya interjected. Humans have one weakness that might work in our favor. They form emotional attachments to other species they consider worthy of protection. If we can convince them we are worth saving. How do we do that when every interaction we've had with them has been antagonistic? Sektar demanded. Admiral Corex stood slowly, his joints creaking after long hours of debate. We ask for help not as superior beings demanding assistance from inferiors, but as neighbors in desperate need. The silence stretched for long minutes as each representative considered the Admiral's words. Pride warred with necessity. Ancient prejudices battled against survival instincts. Finally, Counselor Vex spoke. If we do this, we need to be very careful about how we approach them. Human psychology suggests they respond poorly to deception or manipulation. They value what they call straight talk. Then we give them straight talk, Corex said grimly. We tell them the Devourers are coming, that we can't stop them, and that we need their help. No politics, no hidden agendas, just the truth. And if they refuse, Zethkar asked, then we die with whatever dignity we have left, Corex replied. But if there's even a chance they'll help, we have to try. The vote was closer than anyone expected, passing by a single margin. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, each lost in their own thoughts about what they had just agreed to do, none of them noticed the small observation drone that had been recording everything. In a hidden bunker beneath the council building, Intelligence Director Quintel reviewed the recording with growing unease. The decision to contact humanity would have far-reaching consequences beyond just the current crisis. If the humans agreed to help, they would once again become a major player in galactic politics. Quintel opened a secure communication channel to the Outer Rim monitoring stations. Begin surveillance of human space, he ordered. I want to know everything about their current capabilities before we make contact. Meanwhile, in a research facility orbiting Proxima Centauri, Dr. Sarah Chen paused in her analysis of quantum flux patterns. Her instruments had detected something unusual. Massive gravitational disturbances at the edge of explored space that suggested something enormous was moving toward the inner galaxy. She opened a communication channel to Earth's Defense Command. This is Dr. Chen, at the Proxima station. I'm reading some very strange signatures from the galactic rim. You might want to take a look at this. 3 light-years away, Admiral Jackson Hayes reviewed the preliminary data with growing concern. The readings matched theoretical projections for what an invasion force might look like. Something big, moving fast, and headed their way. Looks like our quiet little corner of the galaxy is about to get interesting, he muttered, reaching for the red phone that connected him directly to Earth's high command. Neither the Galactic Council nor the human observers realized that the Devourers had already detected the energy signatures of their respective civilizations. Deep in the void between stars, vast bioships adjusted their courses, their living hulls pulsing with anticipation. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an irresistible force met an immovable object, and caught in the middle were the species that the gods themselves had learned to fear. The diplomatic vessel, Harmony's Edge, approached the Sol system with extreme caution, its crew of 12 representing the last hope of their respective species. Ambassador Zethkar stood rigid at the observation deck, watching the yellow star grow larger through the reinforced viewport. Despite his earlier protests, he had volunteered for this mission, driven by a combination of duty and curiosity about the species that had humbled his empire centuries ago. Picking up multiple scanning frequencies, reported Lieutenant Crix from the sensor station. They know we're here. Captain Veltar, a seasoned Aquatic Confederation officer, rippled his tentacles nervously. Human detection grids were always thorough. They probably knew we were coming before we entered the outer asteroid belt. High Counselor Nea materialized beside them, her ethereal form shimmering with anxiety. I can sense their emotions from here. Suspicion, caution, but also curiosity. They want to know why we've come. Before anyone could respond, the communication console chirped with an incoming message. The voice that emerged was crisp, professional, and utterly human. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Sarah Martinez of the Sol Defense Force. You are entering restricted space. State your identity and intentions. Zethkar stepped forward, his forearms spread in a gesture of peaceful intent that the humans couldn't see but which felt necessary anyway. Admiral Martinez, this is Ambassador Zethkar representing the Galactic Emergency Council. We request permission to approach Earth to discuss a matter of urgent importance to all sentient life in the galaxy. The silence that followed stretched for several uncomfortable minutes. When Admiral Martinez spoke again, her tone was carefully neutral. Ambassador, given our history with the Galactic Council, you'll understand our caution. What kind of urgent matter requires our attention? The kind that threatens to end all life as we know it, Naya interjected, her voice carrying harmonics that conveyed the depth of their desperation. We face an enemy, unlike anything previously encountered. One that our combined forces cannot defeat. Another pause, shorter this time. Stand by for escort instructions. You'll be guided to Luna Station for preliminary discussions. Any deviation from the prescribed flight path will be considered a hostile act. As their ship was surrounded by sleek human escort vessels, the delegation got their first close look at current human military technology. The ships were smaller than traditional galactic designs but radiated an aura of deadly efficiency. Their hulls seemed to shift and adapt in real time, suggesting advances in metamaterial technology that the Council's scientists had only theorized about. Look at those energy signatures, Dr. Melvin whispered, studying his instruments. Those ships are generating power levels that should require reactors 3 times their apparent size. Humans never did care about what should be possible, Veltar observed. They have a disturbing tendency to make the impossible work anyway. Luna Station was a sprawling complex that seemed to grow organically from the moon's surface. As their shuttle approached the docking bay, they could see human workers moving with the efficient choreography of a species that had turned survival into an art form. Everything was built to serve multiple purposes, with redundant systems and adaptation capabilities that spoke to a mindset forged by constant threat. The delegation was met by a security detail that moved with predatory grace. Their equipment seamlessly integrated into what appeared to be standard uniforms. At their head stood a woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes and scars that spoke of personal experience with violence. "I'm Colonel Rebecca Torres," she announced without preamble. "Admiral Martinez sends her regrets, but she's currently coordinating defense preparations based on some very interesting readings we've been getting from the Rim. You have 30 minutes to convince me this isn't some elaborate trick." The bluntness of the statement caught the delegation off guard. In galactic diplomacy, preliminary discussions could take days before reaching substantive issues. Humans, it seemed, had no patience for protocol when they sensed a threat. "Colonel Torres," Zethkar began, "we appreciate your directness. The situation is indeed urgent. A species we call the Devourers has begun systematically consuming everything in the outer spiral arms. They have already destroyed 17 systems and show no signs of slowing." Torres gestured for them to follow her through corridors lined with displays showing real-time data from across human space. "We've been tracking unusual gravitational signatures for the past 3 weeks. Something big is moving toward the inner galaxy. We assumed it was your people, preparing for another war. We wish it were that simple," Naya said, her form flickering with distress. "The Devourers are not like any species we have encountered. They do not seek territory, resources, or conquest in any conventional sense. They simply consume matter, energy, information, even the quantum structure of space-time itself." They entered a briefing room where holographic displays showed the current galactic situation. Red zones marked Devourer-controlled space, expanding like a malignant tumor toward the core worlds. Colonel Torres studied the display with the clinical detachment of a professional soldier. "What makes you think we can help when your combined fleets couldn't?" Dr. Melvin stepped forward, activating his own data tablet. "Our analysis suggests the Devourers adapt to conventional military tactics and technology. They study our strategies, decode our weapons, and develop countermeasures with disturbing efficiency. We need something they cannot predict or adapt to, something chaotic and unpredictable," Zethkar added reluctantly. "Something that doesn't follow established patterns of warfare." Torres raised an eyebrow. "You want us to help? Because we're unpredictable savages?" "Because you think differently," Naya corrected gently. "When the Elder Ones came to punish the galaxy for its ambitions, every species tried to negotiate, to find common ground, to appeal to reason. Humans attacked gods with improvised weapons and refused to submit even when facing impossible odds. The reports from that time are illuminating, Doctor," Melvin added. "Humans using debris as kinetic weapons, ramming divine vessels with their own ships, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with beings that could manipulate reality itself." Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying the data displays. "You're asking us to fight an enemy that has defeated the combined might of galactic civilization." "Yes," Zethkar admitted. "An enemy that adapts to every tactic and overcomes every technology." "Yes. An enemy that consumes everything in its path and shows no mercy." "Yes." Torres smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression that made the aliens step back instinctively. Finally, a worthy opponent. She activated a communication channel. "Admiral Martinez, this is Colonel Torres. We need to convene the War Council immediately. We have a situation that requires the full attention of the Defense Force. Within an hour, The delegation found themselves in the depths of Luna Station, facing a gathering that represented humanity's military leadership. The chamber was stark and functional, filled with officers who radiated the quiet confidence of a species that had earned its place through conflict. Admiral Martinez entered with the bearing of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. She was younger than the aliens had expected, with augmented eyes that seemed to analyze everything they saw, and hands that bore the calluses of someone who had worked with weapons. "I've reviewed your data," she announced without preamble. "The situation is as bad as you claim. Possibly worse. Our deep space sensors have confirmed multiple massive objects moving at significant fractions of light speed toward the inner galaxy." "Then you'll help us?" Zethkar asked hopefully. "That depends," Martinez replied. "What exactly are you offering in exchange for human blood and resources?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The galactic species had expected to dictate terms, to call upon humanity as a desperate measure while maintaining their own authority. The directness of the human approach was unsettling. "We offer full membership in the Galactic Council," Naya said carefully. "Equal representation, access to our accumulated knowledge, and formal recognition of human sovereignty. Things you should have offered 300 years ago," Colonel Torres observed dryly. Admiral Martinez leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. If we agree to help, we do this our way. No interference from Council observers, no restrictions on our methods, and no complaints about collateral damage. We fight to win, not to meet diplomatic objectives. Some of our methods may seem extreme," added General Harrison, a scarred veteran whose augmented left arm moved with mechanical precision. "We don't conduct limited engagements. When we identify a threat, we eliminate it completely." Zethkar felt his confidence wavering. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that if you want human help, you accept human solutions," Martinez replied. "We don't wound enemies and hope they go away. We don't negotiate with aggressors who threaten our neighbors. We find them, we kill them, and we make sure they can never threaten anyone again." The delegation exchanged nervous glances. They had come seeking allies, but these humans spoke like they were offering to unleash something barely contained. "There's another condition," Martinez continued. "Once this is over, the isolation ends. We want full access to galactic trade routes, technology exchanges, and diplomatic relations. No more treating us like dangerous animals to be kept in a cage. That can be arranged," Naya agreed, though her form flickered with uncertainty. Martinez stood, and every human in the room seemed to straighten with anticipation. "Then, welcome to the neighborhood war. Colonel Torres. Begin activation of the reserve fleets." General Harrison. "I want mobilization orders sent to every human colony. Dr. Kim, contact the research division and tell them to dust off every experimental weapon system they've been working on." "Admiral," Dr. Melvin interjected nervously, "how quickly can you mobilize your forces? The Devourers are advancing at an unprecedented rate." Martinez smiled, and this time there was nothing predatory about it. It was the smile of someone about to share a particularly satisfying secret. "Doctor, human forces have been mobilized since the day we detected your first transmission. We've been preparing for this war for 300 years. Through the chamber's viewports, the alien delegation could see ships beginning to move throughout the Luna system. Not the handful of vessels they had expected, but hundreds, thousands of craft emerging from hidden berths and concealed positions. You see," General Harrison explained, "we learned something from our last encounter with galactic civilization. The galaxy is a dangerous place, filled with species who consider themselves superior to everyone else." "Prepared for what?" Zethkar asked weakly. "For the day when the galaxy would need saving," Admiral Martinez replied. "And for the day when those who needed saving would finally admit that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization is to unleash the barbarians at the gate." As the human war machine began to reveal itself, the alien delegates realized they had not merely asked for help. They had awakened something that had been quietly growing in strength and capability for centuries, something that viewed the Devourer threat not as an insurmountable challenge, but as an opportunity to finally prove what humanity was capable of when truly threatened. The gods might fear them, but the Devourers were about to learn why. The first engagement between human forces and the Devourers took place in the Kepler system, where a human research station had been quietly monitoring deep space for signs of extraterrestrial life. Dr. Tuponides. Dr. James Sullivan was reviewing quantum resonance patterns when his instruments detected something impossible approaching the system's edge. Control. This is Kepler station. He transmitted to Earth. I'm reading massive biosignatures, but the scale doesn't make sense. These things are kilometers long. Admiral Martinez's voice crackled through subspace from the command ship, Indomitable. Understood, Kepler. You are cleared for emergency evacuation. All human personnel are to withdraw immediately. Negative, Control, Sullivan replied, his voice steady despite the fear. I'm staying to gather data. Whatever these things are, you'll need every scrap of information we can get. The first Devourer ship entered normal space like a nightmare made manifest. Its hull was living tissue, pulsing with veins of energy that seemed to drink in starlight itself. Tendrils, hundreds of meters long, swept through space, testing the quantum structure of reality. Where they touched, space itself seemed to wither. Sullivan's instruments went mad, registering energy readings that violated known physics. The creature wasn't just large. It was actively consuming the fundamental forces that held matter together. Control. This is incredible. It's not just eating matter. It's eating the laws of physics themselves. The Devourer began to engulf Kepler station with methodical patience. Sullivan continued transmitting data, even as the station's hull began to dissolve around him. It's adapting to our technology in real time. Our shields are useless. It's learning how our systems work, and simply making them not work anymore. His final transmission was cut short as the station vanished into the creature's maw, but the data he had died to gather reached the human fleet minutes before the first Devourer scouts detected their approach. Admiral Martinez studied the readings from her command chair aboard the Indomitable. Around her, the bridge hummed with activity, as officers coordinated the movements of humanity's secret fleet. 300 years of preparation had created something unprecedented in galactic history. A military force designed not for conquest, but for survival against impossible odds. Analysis, Dr. Kim? She asked the chief science officer. Dr. Elizabeth Kim looked up from her console, her augmented eyes still processing the vast amount of data. It's worse than the council reports suggested. These things don't just adapt to our technology. They consume the underlying principles. Traditional energy weapons become useless because they absorb the energy. Kinetic weapons fail because they alter local physics to make momentum meaningless. And our response? Dr. Kim smiled grimly. We don't use traditional anything. Every weapon system we've developed operates on principles that should be impossible. Since they can only adapt to things that follow known physics, we'll fight them with things that don't. The human fleet spread through the Kepler system in a formation that would have confused any conventional military analyst. Instead of the orderly battle lines favored by galactic navies, human ships moved in, constantly shifting patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually responding to real-time tactical assessments. Captain Rebecca Torres, now commanding the destroyer Persistent, watched the lead Devourer vessel approach on her tactical display. All ships, this is Persistent. Remember, we're not trying to defeat them in the traditional sense. We're trying to confuse them. The Devourers had consumed 17 star systems by studying their prey, adapting to every tactic and technology. But humans had spent centuries studying the Devourers' own methods, developing weapons and strategies that deliberately violated logical patterns. Initiating Protocol Pandemonium, announced Lieutenant Commander Singh from the weapons station. All ships are cleared to engage with random selection parameters. The human attack began with weapons that defied classification. The destroyer Phoenix launched projectiles that changed their fundamental properties mid-flight, shifting from matter to energy to something that existed in spaces between dimensions. The cruiser, Unstoppable, fired beams that worked backward through time, striking targets before they were fired. The battleship, Impossible, fired shells that forgot they had been fired and decided to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. The Devourer ship reeled under attacks it couldn't understand, let alone adapt to. Its biohull tried to analyze the incoming weapons, but couldn't process objects that existed in 17 dimensions or projectiles that had been fired by weapons that hadn't been invented yet. "It's working, Doctor," Kim reported excitedly. "The creature's adaptation protocols are overloading. It can't develop countermeasures for weapons that change their basic nature every few seconds." But the Devourers were not without resources. The lead ship began to pulse, with deeper energies, calling for reinforcements from across the system. Within hours, dozens of the massive bioships were converging on the human fleet. "Time for Phase 2, Admiral Martinez announced calmly. "All ships, implement the Morrison Maneuver." The Morrison Maneuver was named after Dr. Patricia Morrison, a theoretical physicist who had proved that sufficiently aggressive violations of causality could create local pockets of reality where different rules applied. Human ships began to move in patterns that created temporal paradoxes, existing in multiple time streams simultaneously. The Devourers found themselves fighting an enemy that attacked them yesterday for something they would do tomorrow, while receiving damage from weapons that wouldn't be invented for another century. Their bio-neural networks, evolved to process linear time, began to break down under the strain of temporal warfare. "Devourer fleet is showing signs of confusion," reported the sensor officer aboard Indomitable. "They're trying to adapt to our tactics, but our tactics keep changing retroactively." "Good," Martinez replied. "Signal all ships to begin Phase 3. Time to show them what human ingenuity looks like when we're really trying." Phase 3 involved weapons that Dr. Kim's team had developed in secret laboratories hidden throughout human space. They were based on a simple principle. If the enemy could adapt to any logical approach, use an approach that was fundamentally illogical. The battleship Contradiction fired weapons that worked by not working. The cruiser Paradox launched missiles that achieved their objectives by failing to achieve them. The destroyer Impossibility used gravity generators that created gravity by removing gravity. The lead Devourer ship began to exhibit signs of what could only be called mechanical hysteria. Its biohull writhed as it tried to process attacks that succeeded by failing, weapons that worked because they couldn't work, and tactics that were effective precisely because they were completely insane. "Admiral," Dr. Kim called out, her voice filled with amazement. "The Devourer's adaptation systems are beginning to shut down. It's trying to analyze our methods, but every time it thinks it understands them, we change the fundamental rules of what understanding means." Status on the rest of the Devourer fleet? Similar effects across the board. They're designed to overcome superior technology and numbers, but they have no protocols for dealing with an enemy that attacks them with weapons that shouldn't exist, using tactics that violate logic. The battle raged for 18 hours, with human ships darting in and out of engagement range while continuously changing their operational parameters. The Devourers, masters of adaptation, found themselves unable to adapt to an enemy that constantly redefined what adaptation meant. Finally, the lead Devourer ship began to retreat, its biohull scarred by weapons that had attacked it through dimensions that didn't exist. The other ships followed, moving toward the system's edge, with the desperate haste of predators that had encountered something they couldn't understand or overcome. "Let them go," Admiral Martinez ordered as some of her captains requested permission to pursue. "They need to report back to their swarm. They need to tell the others what they found here." Across the galaxy, the alien species that had formed the desperate alliance watched in stunned silence as their instruments detected the impossible. The Devourers were retreating. For the first time since the invasion began, the unstoppable force had been stopped. Ambassador Zethkar stood in the observation deck of Harmony's Edge, watching the aftermath of the battle through long-range sensors. "They did it," he whispered in disbelief. "They actually drove them off. Not just drove them off, Counselor Naya corrected, her form shimmering with amazement. They confused them. The Devourers don't understand what happened here any more than we do. But in the depths of space, something else was watching the battle's aftermath. Ancient sensors, older than any current galactic civilization, had detected the distinctive signatures of human temporal warfare. In dimensions beyond normal space-time, beings that had once called themselves gods stirred uneasily in their cosmic exile. The humans had grown stronger during their isolation. Much stronger. Strong enough to fight impossible enemies with impossible weapons. Strong enough to make even the Devourers retreat in confusion. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, something that had once ruled the galaxy before retreating to avoid humanity's ancestors, began to make calculations about whether it was time to pay another visit to the troublesome species that refused to know their place in the cosmic order. The war against the Devourers was far from over, but for the first time since it began, the galaxy had hope. Hope that came from the species the gods feared. The species that bit gods and made them bleed. The species that looked at impossible odds and responded not with fear or surrender, but with weapons that shouldn't exist and tactics that violated sanity itself. The humans had returned to galactic affairs, and reality would never be quite the same again.